give us a brief history on the Meaux home and why should it be important?
Well, the Meaux home is actually named after Dr. Meaux. It's just incidental that he happened to be a surgeon during the Civil War. He was never combative, nor did he ever own any what people would be sensitive with history as far as slavery. He never owned it. He was never a property owner at that time. He was educated in Philadelphia at the School of Bowling and Darber, and that's where he received his medical degree. His family moved here to Fresno for several reasons. Number one being his wife's health was failing. She had what was at the time called consumption. Later on, it became known as we know it today as tuberculosis. So he needed a drier climate, and Fresno was the new and upcoming town. That being said, Molly did all the architectural work dealing with the architect on building this home, as did Dr. Meux's brother, Joseph. Dr. Meaux also became the first president of the Fresno County Medical Association here in Fresno. And he also did extensive growing around Fresno, doing grapes and oranges. So it wasn't just moving here for anything other than being a doctor. He was looking for a new way of life, as were many of the original Fresno residents.
Okay, and so why should it be important to Fresno, to Fresnans, to keep that name and that history for the next, into eternity?
Well, go ahead, Linda.
As a retired teacher, I think history is very important. We have second and third grade classes come here because they are studying Fresno, and it's important. Children need to see and touch and look and smell, using their senses to learn. You just can't learn this in a textbook. It's not fun that way. So we very much enjoy having the school children come as field trips, taking them through the house and showing them. The kitchen is fascinating. There's all kinds of tools and implements in the kitchen, and children's toys upstairs, and just things that are fun for children or anybody, any age, to learn, to see what it was like to be in Fresno in 1888, 1889.
And Corona had something.
We're going to go to Corona and then to Steve after that.
But the question is, I think that you've asked is why this house is very, very important. The family's important. It's the best example of Queen Anne architecture. So from an architectural point of view, as well as a social history point of view. But I think the question is, why would one change the name? I mean, what would be the rationale? Was he a bad actor? No. He served in the Confederate Army. He was from Tennessee. He then served briefly in the Union Army. That's part of history. So, I mean, there's absolutely no rationale to change the name of the Thomas R. Meaux home, which is on the National Register of Historic Places, as well as our local register.
Got it. Thank you, Corona. Steve?
Yeah, Darius. So behind me on the wall is a quote from George Orwell's 1984. And another quote from that book is, "He who controls the past controls the future, and he who controls the present controls the past." And the main star of that book was a guy named Winston Smith, and he spent 8 hours a day working for the Ministry of Truth, and his number one job was to erase the past. And it gets to the point where you can erase people, you can erase fact, it doesn't matter. Once you're under a one-party system, you can do whatever you want, and you can make it to where people didn't even exist. In our society today, we should not be comparing ourselves, as Jim did earlier, to those who would burn books. Darius, you come from a culture that you immigrated from, where they were more than happy to burn books. In Eastern Europe, they've been more than happy to burn books at times. The American culture should not go that direction. Now, if somebody's an elected official like me and I say something completely terribly stupid, I expect you to hold my feet to the fire. That's a lot different than taking away the name of the Meaux home or Chandler Airport without any context at all and just erasing our past. If somebody wants to point to the past and say they got it wrong back in the past, I wish they would have done this or that differently, I'm into that. But I do agree with Linda Doubles, you know, as a history minor at Fresno State, that our past is very important, and we should not allow people to real easily go in and make adjustments to the past.
The museum is called the Meaux Hall Museum simply because the family that built it was named Meaux. And that is the proper protocol to follow when naming a historic building for the National Registrar, is to name it after the original building family. What we teach here at the Meaux Home is Fresno history. We're not teaching about Southern states. We're teaching about what life was like to live in Fresno during the 1880s, 1890s era, Victorian Fresno. Because if without history, we're doomed to repeat things in the future. That's
Great.
why it's so important to have this home and the architecture.